right, welcome into LFFL Prime Time, the first version of I'm not quite sure what happened in some leagues version. Welcome in 5 minutes. Let me update you on what I know and what I don't know. So, starting the LFFL, what we have here is we have Bill over Andy by 2 points, I think. The other four games not close enough for it to matter. We have Todd over Eric, Josh over Matt, Phil over Miles, myself over Greg. Assuming Bill beat Andy, which I'm pretty sure is right. Todd moved to 5-0. Bill sitting at 4-1. Myself and Bill sitting at 3-2. We got a log jam with Greg, Eric, Matt, and Josh at 2-3. Andy and Miles at 1-4. Now I want to point out Miles' score. Miles' score doesn't look great at 58. The lowest score since 2008 when Bill racked up 51 big points. Luckily for Miles, though, this league has had strong players in the past named Andy Wagner and Jeremy. Those two have combined for 8 different games below the score of 40. If that's not impressive enough, Jeremy scored a whopping 11 back in 1993. So, good news, no one's in a big threat to score low. It actually has not happened a ton outside of those, like 10 different times Andy Wagner and Jeremy couldn't break 50. It's really only happened a handful of times. So, bad luck, Miles. Better luck next week. Moving on to this next week, we got Miles facing Eric. Eric won the only meeting they have last year. We got Bill versus Josh. It's actually a really tight series with Bill holding a 17-16 lead in it. We go for Phil versus Matt, which is not a tight series. Phil actually has a commanding 37-22 lead in this series. And I'm actually most surprised to see they've never met in the Super Bowl. And you would think, given the 90s, we had smaller leagues, you'd think they would have met in a Super Bowl, but they never did. They played a couple of times in semifinal games, have actually not met in a playoff game in the 2000s. So strange that they played that much, but never in a high stakes affair. Todd is facing Greg. This is actually a rematch of Super Bowl number 9, which was won by Greg. However, Todd has been 10-3 against Greg since 2010 and now holds a 19-9 lead in the series. So Todd is really handling Greg right now. And finally, Andy and I playing. I do have a slim 14-11 lead over my brother in the series. Moving on to LFFL 2. Again, nothing super close here, so I'm pretty confident in all this because I am confident the Merrills beat me. Bill beat Andy, Greg beat Eric, Todd beat Sean, Phil beat Miles, and the Merrills beat me. Bill sitting on top, undefeated still at 5-0. Greg and Todd right behind at 4-1. Sean and Eric at 3-2. Andy's at 2-3. Costly loss for myself and Miles this week. Both lost to the two teams at 1-4 on the bottom, Phil and the Merrills. They drop us to 1-4 also. Coming up this week, got Miles versus Greg, got Merrills versus Bill, Andy versus Phil, Todd versus Eric, and Sean versus myself. Moving on to the LFFL 3, which has disappeared. Here it is. We have Eric beating Greg this week, Miles over Matt Merrill, Phil over Matt Brennan, Andy over Todd, Bill over myself. Miles sits on top at 4-1. Nice cluster of teams at 3-2. Phil, Eric, Andy, Bill. Another cluster down here at 2-3. Matt, Merrill, myself, Greg, and Matt Brennan. And then Todd bringing up the end at 1-4. This week I got Bill versus Andy, Phil versus Todd, Greg versus Miles, Matt Brennan versus Eric, and Matt Merrill versus myself. And moving back to the LFFL 4, Bill, congratulations. Second win in the last 3 weeks. His 6th win in his career. 183 is a very good number, very high scoring week this week. You'll notice my 128, only good enough for 8th place. We got Miles coming in a very close second. Matt Brennan placing 3rd for the season. I've got Eric in the lead at 35. Big tie for second between Bill, myself, and Greg. Matt Brennan right in there. Nate is in 6th, and you can see the standings from there on out. And then down to the LFFL 5, this is absolutely one where I am not going to guarantee any accuracy here because with the defensive players and tackles, and we had 2 really close games. So the games I'm sure of, Greg has beaten Bill, Phil's beaten Todd, and I have beaten Slick. The ones I'm not sure of, Miles over Sean, Eric over Andy, I'm just not sure. If the standings hold as I've scored it, Greg's in first at 5-0, Eric's at 4-1. Bill, Andy, and Phil hanging there at 3-2, and we got a group here at 2-3. Myself, Miles, Slick trying to fight our way in the playoffs. This week we have Bill versus Andy, Greg versus Todd, Slick versus Sean, Eric versus Miles, and Phil versus myself. 5 minutes, got it done. Good luck to all of you next week.